I want you to turn to your neighbor and ask them, who's looking out for me? Got a neighbor on the other side. Ask them, who's looking out for me? Amen. You may be seated in the Lord's presence. That's what I want to talk about this morning. Who's looking out for me? The highest calling in this church is not mine. It is yours, especially if God has graced you to raise children. What I want to do this morning is to take what may be a familiar text to some and an unfamiliar text to others, and I want to look at it from an unfamiliar perspective. There are four main characters in this chapter. I want to name each one of these major characters, and I want to name them in the order that they appear. Normally, whenever this passage is preached, Brother Shay, it is normally preached from the perspective of the mother who comes to the prophet Elisha. I don't want to preach this from the perspective of the mother. I want to walk through all of the characters in this chapter, and then we'll decide somewhere along the way who it is that we would like to highlight. I already know, but y'all will figure it out as we go along. Well, who is the first main character presented in this text? She is in verse 1. There is a commonly distracted mother. A commonly distracted mother. Because verse 1 says, now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets. That means that her husband was a student of biblical knowledge and biblical exposition. Her husband was a prophet in training. She cried out to Elisha, and what she says is, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. Now, she already lost her husband, and now she is about to lose her sons. She is what I call, Sister Harris, a commonly distracted mother. A commonly distracted mother. Can I be honest with you, moms? I know that sometimes you are commonly distracted. This woman should have been focusing on grieving the loss of her husband. Instead, her mind is distracted by a financial crisis. Who am I talking to in here today? You ought to be focused on one thing, but you're distracted by something completely different. This is a commonly distracted mother. She should have been focused on the loss of her husband. Instead, she's got to focus on this enormous financial responsibility that is before her and the fact that she is about to lose her husband. Let me put it this way. Sometimes you should be focused on that which is natural, but instead you're focused on that which is unnatural. Unnatural. You should be focused on your health, the health of your children. Instead, you got your mind on how you're going to pay the doctor bills. You should be focused on the success of your marriage and going on trips and enjoying one another's company, but instead you find out that you married a zero that you thought was a hero. You are just commonly distracted. You go to work on your job and all you want to do is do your job, but you are distracted by some coworkers who don't know how to mind their own business. Always dipping in your Kool-Aid and don't even know the flavor. You should be focused on your childhood, your grades, enjoying the life that God has given you. Instead, you are distracted by faint knocks that you hear on the door in the middle of the night and the fear that what may occur after the knock. Let me hand you some pain medicine. The pain medicine is this. Whenever your natural turns unnatural, it makes you a candidate for the supernatural. Whenever your natural turns unnatural, it makes you a candidate for the supernatural. So the first main character in this text, there is a commonly distracted mother. That's not all. The second main character is found in verse 2 through verse 7. I love this guy. There is a self-conscious intercessor with a strong prayer life. You say, Pastor, that's long. That's why we put it on the screen. There is a self-conscious intercessor with a strong prayer life. I want to recommend that somewhere on your friends list that you make sure you have some intercessors who are self-conscious, but they pray a lot. Okay, let me help you. Sister Ramona, that means you need some people who are intercessors, but they're not so deep until they think they know everything. You need some people who have a strong connection with God, but they recognize that they need to stay in constant communication with God, but they got a strong prayer life. See, when your prayer life is strong, even when you are faced with unexpected circumstances, you have a God who is already in your circumstance, preparing your circumstance for you or preparing you for your circumstance. Hey, watch him. His name is Elisha. Watch him in verse 2. Elisha said to her, I love this. This is the self-conscious part. What shall I do for you? You read this same verse in the Message Bible, and the Message Bible says that Elisha said, I wonder how I can be of help. You need some people who love God but recognize they don't know everything. They're self-conscious. Watch Elisha's response in verse 2. What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? She said, your maidservant ain't got nothing in this house but a jar of oil. And because Elisha had a strong prayer life, he recognized that God can do a lot with a little if you let him. So Elisha said, she said, my husband gone, we broke, they've come to take my two sons. Elisha first wondered what he could do to help. Then he said, wait a minute, I've seen God work before. What do you have that we can start with? Jesus one day was surrounded by a multitude of people, and it had gotten late in the evening. There were thousands of them, as many as 20,000 of them. And the disciples came to him. They thought they were being smart and proactive. They said, Jesus, it's getting late. The stores are about to close. We need to let these people go home so they can stop by Harvey's or stop by Publix, stop by Subway, stop by the McDonald's before they were 24 hours. The Jerusalem McDonald's was not 24 hours. Jesus, let's let the people go home so they can catch the store before the store closes and at least get some peanut butter and jelly to put together a sandwich. And Jesus said, y'all feed them. And so they checked their money bag. They said, Jesus, we so broke. We so poor until we can't even afford the other two letters. We're not poor. We poor. Said, Jesus, we don't have enough money to feed all of these people, more than 20,000 people. And Jesus said, search the crowd. And all they found was one little boy out of 20,000 whose mother had packed him a lunch. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And Jesus said, I can work with that. So Elisha said to the woman, what do you have that we can start with? And watch the woman's response. The woman said, I ain't got nothing except a little jug of oil. And what is the thing you have when you think you have nothing else? There's still something. I watch people, especially when they come, but Pastor, I'm broke. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you still wearing a gold chain? You got some options. Oh, let me arrange. You got some options. You got some stuff you can sell. Anything you bought, you can sell. Even if you have colored it, you can still sell it. Somebody will buy it. Somebody out there is looking. Somebody out there is looking for that deep wave. Some of y'all think I'm speaking in tongues. Somebody know what I'm talking about. So all I have is a jar of oil. Verse 3. Then he said, go borrow vessels at large for yourself from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Do not get a few. What is interesting is he tells her what to do, but does not tell her why. And that's how you know you're in the right place with God, when you can follow instructions without having all the details. Now, if you're that kind of person, you got to know everything. You already broke, busted, and disgusted. You're the one reaching out for help. Least you can do is follow instructions. Verse 4, and you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons and pour out into all these vessels, and you shall set aside what is full. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, and they were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there is not one vessel more, and the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest. That means that God supernaturally jumped into the jar of oil. And when the jar should have been empty, it kept on flowing. When her natural turned unnatural, it put her in a position to receive the supernatural. Am I the only one in here who knows what it's like to get in the car on Monday and the tank is on E, and somehow the Lord just let you keep right on rolling until payday comes along? Has anybody ever had God to stretch something for you? See, I grew up, and my parents were financially strapped. There were challenges in my household for a number of different reasons. And Sometimes when we ate cereal, Sister Lisa, we had milk. It wasn't Mama and Papa Gus. It wasn't Gustafson Farm and T.G. Lee. So I want our young people to hear this, to give you a sense of perspective on how life works. There is a milk that comes in a can. It's called carnation milk or pet milk. And what my mama would do is take the bowl of cereal, poke some holes in the can, pour that carnation milk into the cereal, then take the bowl to the sink, turn the water on, and put the bowl up under the water to mix the water with the evaporated milk so that we could have cereal. Okay, sometimes it wasn't no oxtails or oxtail gravy. So what my mama would do was to take white rice and take butter and melt it on top of the rice. And that was a whole meal. Have you ever had God to stretch some stuff? When you thought you didn't have enough to make it, he made a way out of no way. And God took her oil and he stretched it. But what she needed was a self-conscious intercessor with a strong prayer life. There's a third main character in this chapter. He's in verse 1. There is a loving, missing husband. He's in verse 1. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophet cried out to Elisha. Now watch what she said. Your servant, my husband, is dead. She didn't have to say none of that. All she had to say was, my husband's gone. She reminded him that your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord. He was loving, but he was missing. And some of us are so upset at the people in our lives who missed some stuff, instead of being able to understand that you can be loving and still be missing. Kayla, for years when I read this text, I was so upset with the husband because he left his family in debt. And that always bothered me. My response always seemed like he should have been better prepared financially so that he did not leave his family in a place of financial struggle. But the inference of the text is he was doing the best that he could under the circumstances that he had. Okay, now let me hit rewind. This means he was a hard-working, God-loving man, ended up in debt, but he didn't have a flat screen TV on every wall. This is not a man who had 100 pair of Jordan tennis shoes, but no dental insurance for his children. This is a man who died unexpectedly and unfortunately left his family in dire financial straits. So number one, there is a commonly distracted mother. There is a self-conscious intercessor with a strong prayer life. There is a loving, missing husband. But here's where I'm trying to go. there are two sons who don't know what to do. Because often we think about the preacher in 2 Kings 4. Often we think about the woman. Rarely do we look at this experience through the lives of the children. Because they're grieving the loss of their father while observing the anxiety of their mother. So watch this. Daddy is gone, and part of mama is so distracted until it feels like she's gone too. And I'm going to say to some parents in here, I know you're going through, but work hard to keep your children from not having to go through while you are going through. Because the text didn't say she had a conversation with her kids. She had a conversation with an intercessor who was self-conscious but had a strong prayer life. So moms and dads, keep your venting under control so that you are not creating a childhood for your children that they're going to need counseling just to overcome. So there are two sons who don't know what to do. And all I want to focus on in these last couple of minutes is, what does God say to the children in crisis in 2 Kings chapter 4? And let me give you several, and I'm done. Here's the first one. The first thing that God says to them is in verse 2 through verse 4, and it is this: you can hear God in some dark places. Because they knew, their mama said, I'm going to talk to this prophet that the Lord has been using. And they said, yes, ma'am. And then she comes back from the prophet. And the mother says, go borrow jars and vessels from all of our neighbors. And you know what they did? They got up and went and got them jars. They didn't know why they were getting those jars. They didn't know what God was going to do with those jars. But they were obedient to what they heard from their mother, because they knew their mother was being obedient to what she heard from the man of God. It taught these young boys that you can hear God in some dark places. And I want you to take that with you today. That even in some dark places, you can still hear the voice of God. Here's why this is so important. Because there are some things that the Lord wants to say to you that he will only say in the dark. And if you're not listening out for what God is trying to say because it's dark, you're going to miss him altogether. You can hear God in some dark places. But that's not all. You can see God in some dark places. Because remember, Elisha said to her, when y'all borrow the jars, go in the house, shut the door, just you and your boys. They saw what they had never seen before. One vessel filled many vessels. And they saw God perform the miraculous, but it all occurred in a dark place. Their biggest tragedy turned into their largest opportunity to witness the miraculous. See, one of the things I learned about God, you don't have to wait till you get old to get sense. Let me hit rewind. Young people, you don't have to wait till you get old till you get sense. Fact about it, you need sense as quickly as you can get it. Because sometimes the biggest mistakes you will make in life is while you're young. So the most sense you get early on. See, that's why I still believe in this old school thing of respecting your elders, of honoring your mother and your father, of putting handles on people's names. Like yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir. I can tell you point blank straight. Don't never come to me looking for a job if you don't know how to say yes, sir, and no, sir. Don't ever expect me to recommend you for employment with somebody else if you don't know how to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Now, that's me. I'm old school. See, I know some of y'all, it's a little more new school. And I know when it happened. I know why it happened. I know how it happened. Here's how it happened. Grandmama started getting younger. And they felt that they didn't even want to be called grandma. All of a sudden, you G-Unit. You wonder why don't nobody look up to you. And you say, don't come here with all that ma'am and sir stuff. You make me feel old. Matter of fact, if I take you with me to the mall, don't even act like I'm your grandma. Somebody might be trying to talk to me. Y'all know I'm right. She's so thirsty trying to catch a man. She ain't even noticed your ice cream melting all over your arm. She's so busy trying to catch Earl. Verse 5 through verse 7, these boys saw God in a dark place. Here's the last thing, and I'm headed out. Number one, you can hear God in some dark places. Number two, you can see God in some dark places. But here's the last one. You can feel God when he turns your dark place into a good place. You can feel God when he turns your dark place into a good place. Watch verse 7. She came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil, pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest. She got more than what she asked for. All she wanted was, give me a way to pay the debt. And the preacher said, I'm not only going to give you enough to pay the debt, I'm going to set you up for the rest of your life. And these boys were able to witness this. And it revealed three things to them, and I'm done. Here's the first one. There is safety in a good place. There is safety in a good place. Hey, catch this. Slavery for these boys was off the table. They done lost their daddy. And the word on the street was the creditors were coming to take them away from their mother and make slaves out of them. But when they got done hearing God speak and watching God move, slavery was off the table. That means there is safety in a good place. And parents, one of the greatest things you can provide for your children is a safe environment. Sometimes you need to adopt the mentality that when people ask you, who do you trust? Your answer is God. Let me hit rewind. When people ask you, who do you trust as it relates to your children? Your answer is God, and I'm watching everybody else. Male, female, watching everybody else. Because I ain't too sure about who raised you. I'm not too sure about your mental stability. I'm not sure about what you watch on the internet when you by yourself. I'm not sure about what seeds have been planted in your mind. So until I can be sure, got my eyes on you. Oh, can so-and-so come and stay overnight? No, I ain't going to be able to do that because I don't know nothing about your house. I don't know nothing about your people. Y'all might not have no smoke detectors, no fire extinguishers, none of that. Well, Pastor, sometime I need a break. You should have thought about that. It's a break that got you in this situation. Sometime I need a break. No, you need to grow up and recognize that your children need a safe living environment. There is safety in a good place. Number two, there is security in a good place. Your children need to feel safe. They need to feel secure. Your children need to feel safe. They need to feel secure. Okay, can I say this quietly? If your hair is done and your lights are off, if your pit bull in the backyard is eating better than your children at the table, spinning rims, and can't even take nobody to the doctor when the flu hits to keep it from becoming pneumonia. These children had security because God had so orchestrated their future until he took care of them then and then on. There is safety in a good place. There is security in a good place. I'm done. There is sustainability in a good place. Hey, because when you grow up hearing God in dark places, when you grow up seeing God in dark places, when you grow up in safety and security, watch this, it changes how you raise your own children. It is a common statistic that the children of homeowners are highly more likely to become homeowners themselves because that's all they know. It's also a common statistic. If you grow up around people who always beating the system, if you're not careful, you're going to be trying to beat the system. Your kids know, they know. This is April. Your kids know if you claim some people on your tax return who don't live in your house. They heard you on the phone saying, is you claiming all of yours? Because sometimes with maximum deductions, there's only a certain number of folks you claim. And you say, if you ain't going to claim all of yours, let me get Ray J. And then let's take ours, whether they need it or not, and some children do. Some children do. Some children do need behavioral modifying medication. But if the only reason you're giving it to them is because you get a bigger check for them, and by the way, my parents owned a pharmacy. My parents owned a pharmacy. They didn't need a doctor to prescribe it. They were physician and pharmacists. They had some stuff they mixed up, and it modified our behavior. And all they had to do to mix it up was take it off. Then it was pre-mixed after that. Pre-mixed after that. I told you what my siblings and I were talking this past week. We say that as we're going through my dad's personal effects, I said, if I find that belt he used to beat us with, because we called it white lightning. It was about this thick. It was white, had a very distinctive jingle on the belt buckle. And what he would do, when he unbuckled it, he'd grab one end, pull it out. And I promise you, in my mind, when he pulled it out, it stayed straight. It was like the sword of Zorro. And my siblings and I have been wondering, if we find that belt, what we gonna do with it? And I say, I don't know if I'm gonna cut it up, burn it, or what. But imagine how the lives of these sons were changed as it relates to how they were going to raise their future children. And I'm sure as soon as they grew up and got children of their own, the first thing they told them was, can't nobody do you like Jesus. Can't nobody do you like the Lord. I'm sure they sat their own children down and said to them, you got to learn this. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege it is to carry everything to God in prayer.